on the potential benefits of DNA to help fight wrongful convictions.
For eyewitnesses, there's basically a similar knowledge of lay people, like the jurors in the UK, as there is in the United States. But they are more amenable to change in the UK. They're more amenable to change. An example is the Devlin Report, which was done in the 70s, that basically found that people should not be convicted solely on eyewitness identification. But it was never made into law, so it is still possible in the UK to be convicted just on an eyewitness testimony. But so that's a real big issue. And also another issue is that expert testimony is really not allowed as much in Great Britain as it is in the United States, so we need to get more of that in there as well.
Expert testimony could also use some changes on the side of DNA. Illinois currently uses the Fry standard in terms of introducing expert witnesses to the stand to testify on their related field. The federal government has switched over to the Daubert standard, which I believe Illinois should switch over to because it would make it easier for experts of lesser known or more new fields of forensics or scientific study to come testify. So persons who are experts in the field of error rate testing within laboratories or who want to highlight the importance of conclusions that are probabilistic, not 100% matches, would be able to come testify under that standard that is whatever.
Expert testimony is also really important for eyewitnesses and eyewitness testimony. They need to really teach people how not useful eyewitness testimony can be. So there really needs to be more experts available.
Some other policy changes that would benefit the correct and accurate use of DNA forensics would be the complete changeover to probabilistic conclusions. So there would need to be a completely scientifically accurate statement made about forensic evidence, especially DNA, in court. This could be helped by the Daubert standard, that switchover. An international standard set across forensics or DNA in general would make that a lot easier. And then especially error rate testing, which would be the biggest change because it would require, maybe on a national standard, like a double-blind error rate testing to be done across a random array of forensic laboratories that could present to jurors the actual accuracy and efficacy of these different forensic sciences, and especially DNA, which is seen as being 100% true and the magic end all be all of forensics.
Policy changes for eyewitness testimony include educating criminal justice workers so that everyone is aware, allowing expert testimony in the field of psychology related to memory, and changing public opinion in general about eyewitness memory, letting everybody know that it's not as great as it seems.
So these are all policy changes that we think would make wrongful convictions lessened in the United States and in Chicago in particular.
Fantastic presentation. I'll just say one thing, that I really enjoyed that, we do hold DNA up on a pedestal in the criminal justice field. Within a presentation focusing on the fallacies and the vagaries of eyewitness identification, you also apply that same skepticism to DNA. I think that's fantastic, and it shows a foresight in what kind of questions we're going to have to raise about that type of forensic science in the future. So good job.
And you guys did fantastic, and obviously you're both in my area here of interest, and so I think you guys did a really great job on presenting some of the really interesting tidbits, each related to your fields of study. And so for April, I talk with my forensic science students. We learn about Fry and Daubert, and I tell them Daubert's the more critical standard. It has more criteria. Hopefully, then we're keeping junk science out. You might be interested to know there's been a little bit of research looking at what happens with judges when we have the Fry standard versus the Daubert standard in particular states. And what we're finding is that judges aren't so good at evaluating scientific evidence, and therefore, even though you would like to think that Daubert should keep out the junk science, it's being admitted at kind of comparable rates because they don't know how to ask if something has an error rate. They don't know what to look for. So I hope with your research and whatnot that the both of you will go off and change the world here. So good work.
All right.
name is Samantha, and my project is called Funding the Innocent. And a recurring theme that in various stories we were researching was the power DNA evidence had in these post-conviction cases. So my goal behind my topic was to better understand the system in regards to DNA testing funding as it exists today in the US and UK. So why should we fund DNA testing at all? Okay. In the United States, 17 people have been sentenced to death before DNA proved their innocence and they were released. There have been 280 post-conviction DNA-based exonerations, and in about 40% of these cases, the actual perpetrator has been identified by DNA testing. Ultimately, DNA brings a note of finality to the system, as it can disassociate the innocent from the perpetrator with scientific evidence. But then there comes the issue of exonerations costing a lot of money. Well, testings are actually relatively low considering the cost to house one inmate. Housing one inmate at the average state prison can run anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000, while tests cost anywhere from $50 to $5,000, including all the materials and personnel. Therefore, exonerations can actually end up saving the state some money. So DNA evidence can be a very powerful tool in the criminal justice system. So how does the testing get funded? The federal government provides annual block grants to the 200 or so public laboratories that perform forensic DNA analysis. These block grants fund the work of the public labs as well as work outsourced to other private laboratories. We can see an example of this in the Bush administration from 2004. The president approved $100 million from a spending bill which was approved by Congress for DNA spending for that fiscal year. $60 million of that amount was to help state and local governments test evidence from unsolved crimes and for taking DNA samples from convicted felons. The remaining $40 million went to lab improvements and training. Bush then also generated another $800 million for a 5-year period to clear up old crimes and help solve the new. And with Congress's approval, distributed $50 million to provide better special training to judges, lawyers, and prosecutors for a 3-year period. In the UK funding, the central government has provided funds for expansion, but generally police forces pay for DNA testing services, who also work with the forensic science services, who contribute funds from their own budgets, negotiating their own contracts and deciding what to spend as they go. In the UK, there is a much greater emphasis on their national DNA database, which is the largest in the world. An example of the invested money in the DNA database can be seen in April 2000, when the Home Office instituted the National Expansion Program, calling for an investment of £182 million, or equivalent of $270 million. With a population of roughly 52 million people, that's equivalent to about $5 per citizen. Given that the United States population is about 312 million people, in order to obtain the same ratio as the UK's, we'd have to invest over $100 billion, over $1 billion, sorry. So in the UK, the forensic science services work independent from law enforcement, while in the US, DNA tests are conducted by state, country, or city-run crime labs, leaving an organizational dependency of forensic science on law enforcement, which produces the perception of biases. And although there is a more direct relationship between funding and performing tests in the UK, DNA testing is made much more available in post-conviction cases in the US, giving more opportunity to remedy miscarriages of justice and putting set money to greater use. If the system has failed any individual, they should have priority of funds used for DNA testing services. Furthermore, the convicted in the UK should have easier access to DNA testing for their cases, especially when funds provided improve use of technology and